Hello, Ryan here from RLF Vacuum Cleaners in Lakenheath, and today I'm going to do a 1-year review of a Fluke 101 digital auto ranging multimeter. Now, a brief bit of history. I actually bought this a year ago off eBay for $39.99 and couldn't quite believe my eyes, so I bought it thinking it was going to be okay, but actually 1 year later it's actually pretty good. We'll just sort of talk through the basics of it, what I like and what I don't like. So very simply, the big pros I like: it's very small compared to my hand. It's also very thin. It's also very light, and you can chuck it in a bag. It's quite rugged. I can keep this in my tool bag. It's used probably every day, probably not every day, but most days it's being used for doing the basic measurements, voltage. This one does AC, DC, millivolts. Millivolts comes in handy sometimes, and you've got your resistance, continuity, and diode test, capacitor test, and frequency. So, very simply, pros I like: it's very small, it's very light, it's very rugged, it's very basic. And I don't know if you've watched my other previous videos where I talk about how much I love basic testers. So basic, it's literally just 2 plugs, no current range on this. If you're going to use a current range, and what I do is use the clamp meter. It's a lot safer, it's a lot easier than breaking into a circuit. So what we'll do is I'll grab a set of test leads and we'll measure a few electronic components. These meters are pretty good for sort of, the hobbyist electronics, bit of mains voltage use. They're pretty much a good all-rounder. I did look on eBay earlier on today, and I did notice that the $39.99 ones that I was buying a year ago have gone. The next cheapest I could find on eBay was £54. But if you look on places like AliExpress and places like that, you can pick them up for around £40, 40, 45, £50. But obviously, buying from AliExpress, quality is a bit, well, I don't want to say sketchy, but it's unknown. And of course, at AliExpress, it's going to take at least 2 or 3 weeks for it to turn up. So I'll just grab some basic electrical components. What we'll do is we'll give them a quick test, and we'll do a couple of these resistors. So we'll turn that to resistance. And using my little crocodile clips, I'll just put the crocodile clips on like so. So these ones are about 460 ohm, but 470 ohm. The thing about this is it's not brilliantly accurate. It's not like a proper professional, expensive, high tolerance, high precision multimeter. This is a cheap one that gives you a rough indication. And look at the colours on these ones. This should be about 10k. That is, yeah, it's just a bit under 10k. Yeah, resistance, it's alright as long as you don't want a high accuracy meter. So we'll do a couple of capacitors. These ones are 47 nanofarad, so we'll move that over to the capacitance. Go on a quick test. The thing I always found with capacitance is it does take quite a while compared to other meters. That one's going at 54 capacitors in here. It's not 100% accurate, but when you're working on motors and motor capacitors and stuff like that, when you're looking for dead ones, dead capacitors, it's pretty accurate. Oh, it's good enough. Put another one. 53 again. Yeah, I'll give you a rough idea. I'm going to go on to diode test. So we'll stick it on to diode test. Now the thing I found with diodes is it only uses 2 AAA batteries. So if you're using this to light up LEDs, don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up. Going to pick that up? Yeah, it does. It doesn't particularly bright. Doesn't make them particularly bright, but you can see it's got 1.7 volt. On some of the bigger, or some of the more juicier LEDs, you'll get the voltage but you won't actually see any light and come from it. Oh, I hope I connect that the right way, won't it? See that? Yeah. So as a diagnostic tool, it's actually pretty handy, but obviously if you're trying to use it for high precision accuracy measurements, no. This one has a pretty wide working range. It works from 0 to 600 volts AC and DC. So we're just going to chuck some AC volts in with my socket adapter. See, we're getting 247 volts, and what we'll do is we'll stick it over to frequency and we'll measure the duty cycle. So as you can see, again 50 Hertz and a 50% duty cycle, which majority of the time, very rare that you use frequency. Occasionally use it, but as a multimeter this has all your core measurements on and none of that fancy stuff. I don't know if I got one here, one of the cheaper older multimeters I got. I was actually given actually. Like on this one here you've got PNP and NPN transistor checkers. That's not what I was thinking of, but yeah, you got like things like transistor checkers, and you get all sorts of other weird and wonderful things they put on here. Yeah, we've got another one here. We've got a wavy line. I'm guessing that's some sort of output, pulsed output. I never used it. Well, I never used it, so I don't actually know what it is. Got any more? Yeah, you get some multimeters and they have some weird functions on, and I think why. But as a diagnostic tool for what I do, absolutely brilliant. The leads they send out with these are absolutely rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. I replaced them straight away. They just weren't any good for what I wanted. They were just sort of very stiff and hard, and sort of hard plasticky stuff, where realistically you want sort of soft flexible silicone leads. But as a diagnostic tool, I'd highly recommend it. I've carried this around in my tool bag for a year and haven't got fed up with it. Its lightness, smallness, very compactness, and it fits in the palm of your hand. And you can use your other hand probing stuff. It's a brilliant little tool. I'd highly recommend it. If you ever want a cheap multimeter that's got Fluke quality, and I had this open, and it's no different from a more expensive Fluke. Just everything's a bit more compact. Obviously, the chipset and the calibration and tolerances aren't quite the same, but it's good enough for a diagnostic tool. Good enough for electronics work. You know, if you're like me, I'm terrible at remembering resistor numbers. You know, just want to measure resistors, measure capacitors, a little bit of fault finding. Brilliant little meter. And if you can pick these up, occasionally you do see these come up for sale second hand on eBay, or occasionally you might see someone knocking them out cheap. I'd grab one. Grab two actually. I got two of these. I got one in the shed and one in the van, but this is the one out the van, because the one in the van's had the most work. But yeah, if you have any questions or you want to know anything, let me know.